All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Sunny Galt, and I'm with Parents on Demand. Welcome to our webinar today. We are continuing our discussion that we kind of started last month in May about how to make money with your podcast. If you're a podcaster out there, it's a question that a lot of people have. We do have some options. So last month, we talked about embedded ads. And another option for podcasters out there is digital ad insertion. Now, you may have not heard of that before, but that's okay. We're going to break it down for you today. If you haven't heard of Parents on Demand, let me tell you a little bit about us before we get into today's conversation. Parents on Demand is a network comprised of podcasts that are specifically geared towards parents. And we have apps that are available, free apps available on Apple and Android. And we focus on three main things. So if you're a podcaster out there and you have a show that's focused on parents, check this out. We help you with marketing and advertising for your show. So if you're brand new, just starting out, or if you're an established podcast, we help get the message out. We've got newsletters available on our social media sites and partnerships that we have to get your message about your show out there as quickly as possible so you can keep podcasting for as long as possible. We also help you with advertising, which is why we're doing this series on advertising. So if that's of interest to you and you want to make some money with your show, come see us. We can chat a little bit more about that. And then finally, the other side of it is community. And it's one of the reasons I started the network is I love networking with other podcasters and learning from other people. And so we have a closed Facebook group where we post a lot of great content, and our members can get together with each other, perhaps share guests, do some really cool things like that. We do these great webinars each month that are focused on different podcasting topics, usually from more of a parent's point of view, or at least people that are creating content for parents. And so a lot of great resources. Check us out at parentsondemand.com if you want to learn a little bit more about us. All right, so let's meet our guest today, Ilwira, who's from Cabana, which is part of AdLarge. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about that. Welcome, Ilwira, to our webinar today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I work at AdLarge. I'm the VP of digital sales here. I also work very closely with a lot of our content like you and some of our other podcasters. And really our goal is to create a community where brands and podcasts can come together and hopefully, make money for the podcasts and also get the brand some exposure and some reach and some really, really amazing podcast advertising.
Yeah. So I actually know you guys. We've been working together for several years before we started working together with Parents on Demand. So if you guys come on board our network, our digital ad insertion is done through Cabana/AdLarge. And so we've been working together for a while. It's been a really good experience, and I'm excited to educate people a little bit more about what this whole thing is about. Before we dive into digital ad insertion, though, I wanted to bring up something that's kind of timely. It's regarding an article that I believe just came out, and it's talking about podcast advertising and the growth that we experienced from 2016 to 2017. It says 314 million was the number in 2017, and that's up 86%. So Ilwira, I wanted to get your take on that. That sounds amazing from a podcaster's point of view, but from someone that sells ads and helps coordinate all this, what do you make of this?
I mean, it's totally accurate. It's totally what we're seeing in the space. Podcasting is huge right now. We are on an upward wave, and it's really an exciting place to be. People who may not be familiar with podcast advertising, larger brands or agencies that are, traditional agencies are really excited about it. They're asking a lot of questions. They're getting involved. And of course, we have all these mainstay DR advertisers that have just been in the space for a long time and are committed to the space, and they're just still trying to stay in there because they've been in here for a long time and they want to continue that. So it's a really exciting place to be right now, and those numbers are definitely on point for what's happening here at Cabana too.
Do you find that advertisers or the ad agencies, because I think you're primarily working with ad agencies and media buyers, right?
Yeah, we do some direct to brand also, but most of it is through larger agencies, yes.
Okay. Do you find them taking more of a chance, so to speak, on some of the smaller, perhaps more niche podcasts, or do you think that it's mainly more money going to the bigger shows? What are you finding?
We're finding that they want everyone. So it doesn't matter. I mean, of course, there is an element of scale that needs to be there in order for them to place a buy. But if they're looking for a really targeted type of audience, they are willing to spend no matter how big or small the show is. Sometimes the smaller shows actually have a better chance of getting tested for smaller campaigns because they might not have these huge budgets. So I always say, if you have a podcast and you want to get it monetized, don't be afraid of, a small amount and saying, oh, it's too small. Like just try it, because we have a lot of advertisers that are looking for no matter what size. So.
Yeah. And a lot of times our audience, even though it might be small, they're very committed, right? And so when we recommend a product or say, hey, you should check this out, they listen, right? And really the bottom line is conversion. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's talk about digital ad insertion, Ilwira. What is it? What happens? What is digital ad insertion?
So yeah, digital ad insertion, also known as dynamic ad insertion, really whatever term you want to use. It's really just using technology to put advertising into podcasts. All it means is that the show is recorded separately from the actual ad read, and then we use a technology platform to kind of insert the spot into the show in real time. Usually happens at the time of listen or download. So you're getting a new read every time you hit play. You're getting something that can be changed in and out, can be swapped in and out, and it doesn't live forever in an episode. So if somebody goes back and listens to something older, they're getting a read that's relevant right now. So I think it's an important distinction between something that lives forever, right? You're using technology to kind of create a little bit more control.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that technology, because you do have to have technology in order to be using a service like this. I know I started in podcasting, oh my goodness, now close to 10 years ago. And really at the time, there was only one provider that was doing this. Do we see more and more podcast host providers providing this type of service?
Yes, we're seeing it becoming kind of linked with the hosting provider, so you don't actually have to go and get a separate service. Typically, your hosting provider will or won't provide this. The one we work with is Megaphone, and they are fantastic. They are a hosting and ad serving platform first, so there's no distinction, and it really just makes it seamless. It's accountable. All of the measurement is happening in one place, and it's pretty easy to use. So that's the one we use, but there are other ones out there also.
Okay. Now, digital ad insertion or dynamic ad insertion, I come from the TV background, and this sounds a lot like something that we would have in TV. Like if you have a TV show, you basically allow spots for commercials to be, and you may have some, if it's a video, you may have some, black, in between, where the commercial should be, but there's a space, right? And then whether it's, the local TV station or nationally, they'll be able to insert those ads. So is this a unique approach, or are we kind of, borrowing some stuff from traditional media?
Oh, definitely. Everyone else is doing it, really. I mean, and especially if you think of like online media, right, too, like the TV model works, but also online media. When you're watching a YouTube video, those ads that come in before, those are dynamically inserted, right? Like
Right.
they're inserted, they're not, the person creating the video is not stitching those in. There's an algorithm, and they're being dropped in, and there's a campaign window. And if it's in that week that you're watching that video, the ad goes in there. It's even the same thing with display ads, right? Banner ads on websites. Those are all technically digitally dynamically inserted. They're served through an ad server with an it's the same thing. Podcasting is finally catching up to that because of the technology that we've been, working on for a long time that hasn't existed in the past.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of exciting too, because it's putting podcasting on a similar platform than these other mediums. Because a lot of times we've got to fight that stereotype about, well, you're just a podcast and they think we're doing something out of our garage. Not that there's anything wrong with recording in your garage as long as the acoustics are okay. But I think this brings us up on a platform to compete more and to have better statistics and, technology to be able to say, hey, you don't have to just go for radio. You don't have to just go for TV or static ads on a website. Podcasting is a viable option.
Absolutely. That's exactly the point. Podcasting is becoming a more of a mainstream type of media where, not only can you just get this host read and this endorsement and this intimate medium, but you can also be accountable, and you can track it just the way you track your video buy, your display buy.
Yeah. Let's talk about tracking for a second, since you brought it up. What do we know, or what information, and this may vary depending on your host provider, because we even know as podcasters, even if you don't do digital ad insertion, we do realize that your podcast host provider may provide different stats from somebody else. And I know, that we've had some issues. Well, what is a download, and, all that good stuff. What information, let's just use Megaphone as an example, since that's what, you and I both work with for our digital ads. What kind of stat information can we get from that to make us competitive with a radio station or radio show or television show?
Right. So currently Megaphone is able to provide us downloads both cumulatively over a time period, but also per episode. So both of those stats are important. They're also able to provide you with listener data, such as application. So, what app they're using, if they're using iTunes on the desktop, the podcast app, that kind of helps people understand their audience a little bit, how they're consuming. Maybe they don't have a very big web presence, so there's not a lot of listening happening on their website. That could help, if you're wanting to push people to your website, right? So all of those stats are helpful. There is some geo data that is able to be gotten through Megaphone. Obviously, with the privacy issues and the Apple data, analytics data, there's not a whole ton of information that we know other than that, but we are able to access, some of that non-private data through Megaphone. But just an important thing to remember too is the IAB you mentioned before. They are also very active in the podcast space. We are members of the IAB, as are a lot of the companies that we, kind of work with.
Mm-hmm.
And the IAB recently announced these new measurement statistics. It's called the version 2 of their measuring counting statistics. And those are going to kind of shake out this year. It's really important to kind of, as a podcaster, understand what that could potentially do to your numbers. So I'm sure there will be more about that in the coming months, because I know some companies are talking about, switching to this new measure of counting. So that will probably be something as a podcaster that, people should keep in mind, that there could be some new measurement that comes in that could impact some people's download numbers. It's important to know about that.
Okay. Yeah. And it's important that we're all speaking the same language. I mean, I think that's why we're making these rules, and that you guys are part of the IAB, and that you try to work with people that are part of that, because, again, we don't want, we want to have that credibility as a podcaster to be able to say, okay, these stats are legit, and whether you use us or another show, we're still working from the same blueprint, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So one thing I think some people forget, or perhaps they don't realize, when we talk about digital ad insertion, these are actually primarily, at least in my experience, host read ads. It's not just taking a spot that somebody gives you, like we might see on TV, right? If Toyota creates a commercial spot, they spend millions and millions of dollars for these spots, and they will, basically buy airtime, if you will. What we're seeing in podcasting is more of the host read ads. And we talked about this last month when we talked about embedded ads, that was really good. Like we said earlier, podcasters have this conversion. You may have a show, may not have tons of people listening to it, but your audience loves you. And if you recommend something, that's, going to be a really good thing. So am I correct in saying that we're seeing more host read ads? I feel like that's my personal experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that the IAB stat recently is about 67% of all podcast ads are host read.
Okay.
I would say with Cabana, we're a lot closer to 90. We really try to push everyone to do an endorsement and a host read, at least, if they're not super passionate about the product, obviously. But we really think that the medium and the advertisers all benefit from it being in an organic host read spot. And if it's something that doesn't fit the show, it shouldn't really be in the show. So we are seeing some more, pre-produced things coming in, but those advertisers are still being a little bit more flexible with what they're saying. And the copy is not, a traditional radio spot that's repurposed. We're seeing it to be, like, we call it podcast first copy, which is they think of the podcast environment when they're writing their scripts. So even if it's not necessarily a host read, which we of course always stress that's the best one,
Yeah.
But if we're not doing a host read, it's still specially written for podcasts. So that way it's not, just taking a radio ad and slapping it into a podcast, which will totally ruin that intimacy, I think. So
yeah.
We're working with advertisers to kind of help them go through that process and keep that in mind. So even if they do choose the pre-produced route, it's still done correctly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there probably is some education that's involved on your part. I know sometimes I've gotten reads and they basically said, we really want you to read this. It's still a host read ad, meaning it's my voice, but it's pretty much their copy. Is that kind of tricky for you guys? Do you have to do, like you said, a little bit more training to say, well, does the podcaster have a little bit of flexibility because this isn't really how the podcaster talks? Or tell me about that back and forth if there is one.
Yeah. Most of the people who are buying podcasting understand that. But yes, there is a little bit of that kind of education. And that's really where, if we have air tracks from previous recorded ads, we'll send them to them and say, hey, look, this is what you can get. This is how awesome the reads could sound if you let the host kind of do their own thing. Usually that wins them over, right? Because it's so powerful. But yeah, we do have a fair educating, and there's a learning curve in terms of trying to tell them, hey, I understand that these are your points, but let them say it their own way, because it will be more effective. And we see that, the DR rates for reads that are more organic and are not just 60 seconds, but maybe they're a minute and a half long because the podcaster kept talking about how much they love the product. Those are the most effective. It's really just kind of convincing them at the first initial interaction, and then they get it. So.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the process and kind of how all of this works. Let's start with the ad revenue split because it is an ad revenue split between you guys and the podcaster. What does that typically look like?
I mean, it really depends. I mean, I can speak for, some of the deals that we have, but other companies, they provide other services. They could provide less or more services. If hosting is included, if there's any kind of marketing or any kind of studio time or promotion that they might be doing, they can be doing that. So you're looking anywhere from a 50-50 to maybe a 70-30. Some other people maybe have even like a smaller tier of services that they offer, so they take less of a cut. Really depends on what they're offering you and what type of partnership you sign with them. But I would say fairly 50-50 to a 70-30, maybe 75-25 is possible.
Okay. So when you say 70-30, it's 70 podcaster, you guys
Yeah.
30. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make that distinction. Okay. And so you have this relationship with the podcaster. It's agreed upon that, you guys are going to represent them. And then, let's talk about how you guys typically do it at Cabana. So you represent multiple shows. Do you guys usually go out searching for the advertisers? Do they come to you, or explain that process for us?
Oh, great. So it's both of those actually. So we have deals with all of the major agencies, both DR and just media shops. We have a ton of direct clients that we work with that we've worked with in the past, for other campaigns. So anytime we sign a new show or we take on, a large, like maybe like Pod Network, for example, we figure, okay, this is a good place to reach out to because we know in the past they've worked with such and such clients, they would be a good fit. We also, get some feedback from your side, from the podcaster side, and say, hey, I would love to have X brand on my show. It's not always possible because you really, if you're just picking a random brand, they might not always have budget for that media, or they're not planning right now, or whatever it may be. But we do our best to try to reach out and at least establish a connection. So it's really kind of twofold. And then sometimes, we'll get some inspiration, maybe scrolling through Instagram, and we're like, oh, that brand seems like it would be a really good fit for, all of the mom shows we have. So we'll reach out to them. There's a lot of different kind of factors that come into play, and as the space grows, agencies are signing more brands, so they might pick up a brand we work with. It's really kind of, we have to be everywhere, and there's a lot of outreach that needs to be happening at all times.
And I love too listening to other podcasts, and then I hear an advertiser. I'm like, they would be a good fit for my show. Let me tell Cabana about that one and sending it to you guys. Yeah. It's nice because as a podcaster, just to have someone to be like, can you, this is your area of expertise. This is why I really like working with you guys. Like, this is your area of expertise. Let me create the content and you guys can find the advertisers, and it seems to work really well. So you find the advertiser, you go back to the show and see if they're interested, assuming that the show didn't, refer, the advertiser directly to you. And then what is that back and forth? You're negotiating with the advertiser, or perhaps if it's not directly with the advertiser, with the media buyer or the ad agency. And what is that process like?
Right. So obviously first we would make sure the podcaster is cool with the brand. So once we have your approval to move forward, we will then, pitch. So we will figure out if they have a specific, time frame that they want to advertise in, which is like their flight weeks. If they have a specific budget they're looking to hit, how many shows we can include. Obviously if they have a broader demo, we can probably include more shows. And if they're super niche and they only want moms with young children, then obviously we would only limit it to that audience. And then we just decide, we have a rate card price that we charge, and we decide how long they want to be in the show. And that's the cost of the campaign. So that's pretty much, how it goes.
Yeah. So for the rate card, is it usually by CPM, cost per 1,000, when we're talking about views here, or listens for those of you just who aren't familiar? I know CPM can be very confusing, but is that what we're basically going with?
Yes, it's always, for our case, it's always a CPM, a cost per 1,000. A typical rate card ranges from 25 to 35. That's on the high end, but we do offer, deals if people are looking to place a large investment, or if they're, they have specific campaign goals that they need to hit. A lot of these DR agencies and advertisers will have a KPI that they need to hit. And if they're not making over a certain amount on that return, then they're just not going to pay a certain rate. So we try to be flexible with that, because obviously it's in everyone's best interest for the campaign to work. So we want it to work for them, because then they'll come back. So, yeah. But yeah, typically it's a CPM, and I would say around $25 to $30.
Okay. You mentioned KPI. What's KPI?
KPI is key performance indicator. So it's really what and this is something we don't work with directly, but we hear about. So the ad agency, especially if it's DR, will have some kind of a benchmark they need to hit. So for example, if they're advertising a product and they need to have, 10 new clients come in for every one read they buy in order to break even, and it makes sense for them to advertise. So
Okay.
everyone has a different model, everyone has a different percentage. They don't really share much with us about that, but when they do, it's usually like, hey, this is a little pricey for us. If you come down a little bit, we'll be able to continue spending because we'll see more of a return. So it's really a direct spend versus what they're getting back ratio.
Okay. And what kind of feedback do you guys typically get from the advertiser throughout the campaign? Do you have some people that are checking in all the time to make sure they're hitting, the right goals and want to know stats, or are they pretty much hands off until the end of the campaign or near the end of the campaign?
It's another one of those, like, it depends. So
Yeah.
we have clients who are super engaged and are telling us, oh my God, that read was fantastic. Can they keep doing that? This is working really well. And then there's the ones who are saying, oh, our promo code was a little bit wrong, or, they give that instant feedback. And then, they'll just kind of disappear until the end. And they're like, oh, okay, we want to place another buy. So sometimes it's a little frustrating because we're like, okay, so I guess it worked and we'll keep doing it. It really depends. And if it, branding is really the best, because if it's a brand and they just go all over the marketplace and spend in all of these shows and then they come back, that means the medium is working. And we see that a lot. So clearly it's working. And those are really probably the best types of deals for us, is the ones where we're associated with a really big brand that wants to spend in the media, because it just helps other brands come into the space.
So one of the criticisms of digital ad insertion is that you may not get like a lot of repeat advertisers because they're just not seeing a good return on their investment. What kind of I guess response do you have, or experience do you have with people coming back, and are you guys happy with that, or do you see more of a trend for for it not being as strong as, let's say, an embedded ad or baked in ad?
I mean, the baked in ads have this element of, once kind of you stop paying for them, they kind of live forever. And, people could go back 3 years and listen to something and maybe buy a mattress because of it. It's possible. And that's definitely an advertiser advantage. But I also see that people now are getting a little bit more, I think they're getting smarter about it too. Like they're a little bit more accustomed to like binge listening. So if they go back and they're listening and they hear all these old ads, I feel like they might just get turned off, and they stop paying attention because it doesn't sound like it's current.
Yeah.
So I think there's the element of the educated consumer or the listener, and they're understanding that if it's something relevant and it's current and they hear it in other shows and they see, because usually these campaigns are not just podcasts, but there's other media that's being bought at the same time.
Yeah.
It really is more impactful to the brand. So the long tail is great, but I think DI is really, the advantage of it is being able to do it now. And that's when you're spending your money. So
Yeah. And the other thing that I find helpful is that a lot of the time, especially if it's a longer campaign, if it's a month or 2 months or something like that, we may do several different spots, right? And with the technology, you're able to basically organize it so that it's not like if I'm listening to episode 45 and then I immediately go to episode 46, it may not be the same read. It may not be in the same spot in your show, which we really haven't talked about. Where do these ads appear? That'll be my next question. But I find that that's one of the benefits, is that even though it's not a fresh read every time, because that is kind of the benefit, right, of the embedded ads, is that if you are recording it and, you may share different stories, it'll come out a little bit differently. It may not sound so much like an ad. But I do find with digital ads, I've been doing these now for 2.5 or so years with you guys. And we are able to recreate some of that. Like for me personally, I do a lot of reposting of older episodes. I wouldn't be able to record a brand new spot each time. So for my catalog or my archive of episodes, it seems to work out really good. What would you say are some of the other benefits of digital ad insertion?
I mean, it's all of the things you just mentioned too, right? It's the ability to pre-record a bunch of different reads. And, even if the advertiser needs to approve those reads, what if they have a very specific kind of sound they want? And, you give a script to a talent and they record it, it goes in the show and it's live, and you can never remove that. And what if they say something wrong, or they say something that you potentially didn't feel comfortable with? the only way to remove that is to take it down, cut it out of the episode and repost it. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
This way, if we ever have any types of errors, or even if we think maybe a piece of copy isn't performing as well as it could, maybe we go in and say, hey, could you just emphasize these words a little bit more? Maybe, punch up the benefits a little bit more, and maybe that ad does better, the next week in terms of ROI. So it's really the ability to have more control. And from the podcaster's perspective, it's the ability to monetize that back catalog, to monetize any new listeners. A lot of these shows that have like evergreen content or are specific series that come in order. If we see somebody come in and they start listening at episode 1 and you're 300 episodes in, you're going to lose all of the potential dollars for all of those back episodes. Right. This way, if somebody comes in and listens 1 to 300, you can make money on all those people, and your audience can go up, and it's really a benefit to save time for the podcasters.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that. I never really thought of it from the advertiser's point of view. There's that safety net. It's to make sure that, what goes out is exactly what you want. And a lot of times people subscribe to podcasts. So whatever the podcaster puts out, there's a good chance that even if you don't like that ad, let's say that, it was an embedded ad, there's a good chance that a lot of people already heard it before chance to take it down. So
that's a point. And sometimes, especially with maybe podcasts that are a little bit, maybe we have comedy podcasts, right? And I know in parenting this isn't exactly, there's no really, there are some controversial topics in parenting, I guess, right? There could be something that somebody says and the advertiser's like, no, you can't say that, you have to remove it. It's a pain in the butt for everyone. So this definitely helps the advertisers feel like they're safer, I think, in terms of what's being said about their brand.
So how can people find out more about you and Cabana and AdLarge and all that good stuff, if there are?
Oh yeah, so great question. So if you want to sign up for a newsletter, we actually have a team that's dedicated to writing newsletters for podcasters. We really try to, give tips and tricks, and kind of like you do, try to give them an idea of what's going on in the industry. So that's letscabana.com. You can sign up as a creator. Also, our Medium page is really, really excellent. Our marketing team does a great job with that. It's called PodLove. You can find us on Medium. And if you want to just email us anytime, we're happy to work with new podcasters. We're always looking for more content and just kind of, spreading the message of podcasting. So that's hello@letscabana.com. And that's pretty much it between those three. You can check out our website.
Awesome. All right. And if you guys are just tuning in, again, we're Parents on Demand. If you want to learn a little bit more about us, website is parentsondemand.com. And then we're available. All of our handles are at Parents on Demand. So check us out, especially if you have a show that is focused on parents. So Ilwira, thanks so much for being with us today. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. You too. Have a good one.
You too.